So, Joe, you got cancer.
Oh, Jesus, Ali, I did.
How did that come about?
That came about, I think it's 2 years ago now. The most dreaded word in the English dictionary, a word called cancer. The most feared word, the most dreaded word. How did it come about? Well, again, you know me, Ali, it's always a funny story to me. I was down in West Cork and Bantry, and as I said, I worked in Bantry back in from 85 to 90. And my brother's son my brother's son was having a wedding, and he decided he was going to. He's from Middleton. My brother he was a prison officer in Middleton, and his son is from Middleton. They decided they were going to go out of town. So they decided to have their wedding, his son's wedding in Bantry. So I said, oh my God, that's fantastic. I said, I'm due. I'm very due. I work there. I have as many friends down there still as I have here in Westport. And I said, I'm going back and I'm going to have myself a party. So it was June weekend. I think it was around the June weekend. It was the June weekend. And I remember I went down and I let them all know that I was going down. I said, get the red carpet out and the blue one and the red one. And I said, get them tables ready. I'm on the way for the river dance. So I went down anyway, and we had the wedding, and it was the best weekend I had in many's the year. Met a lot of my friends. The wedding was in a new hotel down there, and I remember I had the best fun. We did river dance on the table, as I said I would do. I promised I would do it. We did river dance. They were the crowd that they were there. Ronnie went down with me, and Michael, and a few of us. I said, we are going to steal this show down here, and they were a bit. The groom's father, not the groom's father, he's still there, but the girl's father was getting married. He had died 3 days before. Now he had cancer, but they were hoping he'd hold it. He didn't, so they were kind of down in the dumps. So my brother said, would you kind of lift proceedings? I said, we'll lift them anyway. So down we went anyway, and the wedding, I think, was 150 at it, because it was supposed to be 3, and they had a little wedding a few days before he died. So they were kind of all down. I said, you leave it to me. So down we went anyway, and there was a fantastic band there. So we started off I never forget it, before the wedding started, during the meal, and I started to decide that we're going to have some interviews, and we interviewed Michael and Jim and the whole lot, and we started singing. Jim used to do this song when he gets a few of them. It's a song, pretend you're happy when you're blue, and the leg start going, pretend you're. So we had this little thing going with everybody, pretend you're happy when you're blue. So we started this anyway, and the whole place picked up on it. And the whole place was doing, pretend you're happy when you're blue during the meal. And we lifted the whole thing. And then it continued on. We had the best day of our lives. But to cut a long story short, I came back on the Monday. And I was sitting inside in the restaurant on the Monday. And it's a man in this town, Des Kelly, as you know, Des Kelly was a doctor in this town, practitioner in the town for many's the year. And he was in with me. And I used to take him out once a week for a drink, because he had just retired. And we're just sitting at table 10 in there, and I don't know what it was. I will never forget it. I was there sitting talking to him, and I was just had my finger up to my neck like this, and I was talking. He said, "I'll bring you out tonight. We might go to there's Irish music up in Hobels, and I'll bring you." He loves the Irish music and the Irish dancing. And there was this kind of a cyst or a lump here. I can only equate it to something when you get a sore throat or an ear infection. It's a kind of what would you call it? A little lump or a cyst that was there. And I says, I don't know why. I says, I have a lump there since the weekend. And I said, is that anything? And he said, have you sore throat? I said, no. I said, well, just from singing. I said, have you near anything? No. He said, I haven't. So he said, listen, if you come out to me this evening, I'll have a quick look. And he said, he says, I'll have a quick look, and then maybe tomorrow, he says, go into your doctor and get it checked. I says, fine, I'll do that. So I went out anyway, and to cut a long story short, he put cameras down and lights and all this stuff. He looked, he says, you have nothing on your throat and you have nothing in your ear. So I said, I'm sound. So I said, nothing to worry about. He says, I said, tomorrow morning, he says, you take off, he says, into Dr. White, he says, that's your doctor, go in and get it sorted. And I said, he says, I'm telling you, go in and get it sorted, or I'll push you in the door, he said, to make sure you get it sorted. So anyway, to cut a long story short again, I did that, and the next day we did the usual. And Ali decided to send me to Galway, just to be sure. He says, look, we did the usual stuff to get it checked. And up to Galway I went. So with no care in the world, he says, this little lump there, just get it checked. And we probably think it's nothing, but you're right to get it sorted. So I went up to Galway anyway on this day, and I met this fabulous young man. And I get worried about them when they're younger than I am, because as I said earlier on, I still think I'm only 21. So when they look younger than your son, you get very worried about them. So he took a look at me anyway, and he did an aspirate. He put needles in, and he said, you're a very fit man. He says, you keep fit, you don't smoke, you do the usual stuff. He said, I can't see there'd be much trouble with this. He says, but he says, I've seen men coming in here, he said, on 40 pints a day and 90 cigarettes a day. He said, falling in the door. And he says, if I was a betting man, I'd say they're in trouble. And I look at guys like you coming in the door, he says, and I look at them and I say, sound. He says, sometimes it goes the other way. He says, well, just take a look at it, he said. And he said, either way, he said, we whip these out. He says, if it's a lump in self, he says, no matter what, we whip them out. It'll be a 20-minute operation, and we'll see where it goes from there. So anyway, he took the thing, he took it away, and we got the results back a week later. He says, I've taken the results of that. He says, there's nothing there, he said, from the results of the aspirate show that there's nothing there. We said, we'll whip it out anyway. So I went up to him, and we made an arrangement for the following 2 weeks to get it taken out in the Galway clinic. And up I went, and in we went anyway. He said, I'll be 20 minutes with this, he said, and we'll see what happens after that. So the next thing anyway, all I remember was he woke me up, and he looked at me and he said, Ring, he said, you work me for my money today. And I says, what are you on about? He says, you were 4 hours on the operating table. And I says, is that my fault or was it your fault? He says, it was mine. He said, but anyway, he said, it was God essentially, he said, because the lump you had, he said, it was like, all I can explain is it's like the branches of a tree. It had spread out onto your shoulder, he said, and it had gone up to your jaw. And he says, I am God, and I like to be told I'm God, he said. But he said, if you've come in 6 months' time, he said, I would have to snip the arm here and snip up here, he said, and you would have been gone you'd be going around like Quasimodo. And I said, that wouldn't have been happening, don't worry about that. I said, I wouldn't have been around. So he said to me, very lucky man that you did, he said. Now he said, I've looked at this, he said, and it looks ulcerated. Now ulcerated to me didn't mean cancer, but to him it did. He said, it looks like it's ulcerated, but don't worry about it, we'll send it off and we'll come back to you. And all I remember was, I took no notice, knocked a stir out of me, the lump was gone, and I moved on. So 2 weeks later anyway, Etna kept ringing for the results, and she worked for a GP for 15 years herself, and they kept fobbing her off. And I think she knew, but I didn't. And she knew she's a very shrewd operator. She knew, he called us up on the Monday after 2 weeks. And we went up anyway, and she said she knew because he went in, and every time I went in to meet him, he'd have her seat up against the wall over here, and I would be at the desk in front of him. But this time the two seats were in front of the desk, so she knew. But sometimes I get emotional about this because this is the time that I didn't. It was the first realization of it. It didn't hit me, and I've probably never gone back to that because I just got on with it. And so she knew, and we sat down anyway. He said, I'll never forget. Do you remember the first day he says, Joe, you came to me and you asked me about that lump, and you said, well, can this be right and that be right? And you were asking me questions, and he said, no, he said, what did you ask me? I says, doctor, I can't really remember, says I, what I asked you. He said, did you ask me about, I said, okay, I said, hold it here, I said, I'm not at school, I said, and I'm actually too tired and too old to be dealing with this. I said, I can't remember what I asked you, so will you enlighten me? So he says, you mentioned, so I said, doctor, have I got cancer? I said, if I have, I want to know. He said, you have. So I went the other way. I went into shock, because it wasn't shock as in, oh my good God. It was like, okay. I actually went from thinking, because I had no idea, none whatsoever. So to me that was just, it was a dirty word. But it still, to me, it was like he was talking to somebody else. Talking to me about somebody else. So I said, yeah, okay, fine, it is what it is. I said, just tell me. I said, I want to know if I have cancer, it's fine, we'll deal with it. So he said, yeah. So he said, the frightening bit was, he says, you have it, but we don't know where it is. And I said, oh my good Jesus. He says, I'm sure it's from the upper, from your chin up. He says, up there somewhere. I said, could it be anywhere else? He says, it could be. I don't know where it is. He says, sometimes we don't find it. I says, my good God. So then immediately I'm thinking, that's it, curtains. Nano, leaving town. So he says, what we normally do is that if we don't find it, he says, I'm sure from my experience, and it's from the chin up. He says, what we normally do is we blast everything from up there, and we'll get rid of it. Now, blast to me was a breath of fresh air somewhere he's going to blow on me. And he said, we normally do what we do. We said, we sort it one way or another. So I said, that's fine. I said, that's it, bring it on. And I remember that day, I went home, and I drove home, didn't knock a stir out of me. Ethne was very upset. And we had Toastmasters that night, and I had a role to play. I think I was evaluating somebody at the Toastmasters. It's a speaking club we have. So I was doing a job that night, I think I was evaluating. And I said, I'm going to Toastmasters. And that's it. And she wouldn't go. So, didn't knock a stir. I went in, I did my job. I was probably a little bit quieter than normal. And but it didn't dawn on me. But it was the next day.
What did you talk about on the way home in the car?
We talked about how we were going to deal with it, in the sense of, I've seen a lot of my friends, I'd be kind of high profile around town, and I know everybody, and also we had a business, and I decided there and then that I wanted people to know rather than people not to know, because I found that a lot of people I had known, I used to avoid people when I met them in town, because you didn't know that they know that you knew that they knew that I knew. So I said, look, I'm going to make it easier for people. I'm going to try and find out what I have. I'm going to let them know straight away that that's it. So when they can approach me, they can ask me, they can approach you, and it'll be fine. So that's what we kind of talked about. I said I want it out there, not because I want to be telling people that I have cancer and I'm great, rather than I'm not great. So that's fine. We dealt with that, and we decided that's the way to go. So straight away we said, just let it out there, straight away. We talked about that. There wasn't a lot more we could talk about, because we're both in kind of in shock, I suppose, to a degree. We know there's a road ahead. We know that I suppose it's all shock. And you just said, I said, look, I played football all my life. I said, I'm going into a football game, I'm going into this match. I said, whatever it is, I'll take it on. I get from one end of the day to the other. I said, what we decided was on the way down as well, I said, if it's terminal, if I have cancer, I'm told that it's terminal. There was a man in this town one time, and I won't mention his name, but I remember I thought he was the bravest man that ever walked, because he was given 9 months to live. He was given 2 years to live, or 9 months without treatment, and he didn't take the treatment. And I thought that was the bravest man that ever walked and wouldn't take treatment. Now, I know now why he didn't, because he'd have probably gotten the 2 years, but he'd have gone through hell for the 2 years. Whereas he got 9 months of quality, and the treatment is horrendous. And I know that now. And that's why he probably weighed it up and said, look, I prefer to go in 9 months rather than 2 years. I'd be sick for the 2 years. So I decided there and then that if it was a case that it was terminal, I wasn't taking treatment. And I thought that was very brave of me. I didn't think I had it in me. I didn't think I didn't think I was that strong that I could actually go there straight away. And I meant it. I said, I'm not taking it. That's it. But it's amazing where you go when you're faced with something like that. It's amazing where you go when you're in your head. It's amazing where you go in your mind and your body, what you deal with. So I decided that's what we kind of thing we talked about. So the next day, I never forget, it was in the shop, and it was starting. I went in and I worked, and I started just beginning to dawn on me around lunchtime. And I remember very well, this is a very funny story. All the girls were coming in. It was like, I can only equate it to a fly on the wall in the church. All the women were coming into Etna. I was still working at the back. I was as normal, and they were all coming in, and they were walking up and putting the arms around. Oh, I'm so sorry. And here was I down the back, and I remember them coming in. I'd look down and I'd say, Mary, I'm here. I'll take the hug. I said, I love women. Come down here. I want a little squeeze. Come down. So it was like a fly on the wall in the church. I said, now I know what it's like to be dead. But anyway, I'll never forget, Ollie. It hit me about 2 o'clock that I could have terminal cancer, because we didn't know what we had when we were up there. And I started just to start a little bit, feel a little bit sorry for myself. And I remember at table 1, you know where table 1 is, the very end of the restaurant, I was just sitting there at 2 o'clock, just beginning to feel sorry for myself. And I'll never forget it. The door burst open. And this guy called Tommy Carew, he plays music in the town, he's married to Eileen McKay, great character. And he burst through, and all I remember was the door hitting the wall anyway, and he stood there, he's a big man. And he stood there and he looked down and he said, ring, he said. I hear you're fucked. And he looked down at me and I said, come down. And the restaurant half full. And he rushed down in here. He said, I hear you're fucked. He said, we better go for a drink before you leave town. He said, and we're going now. And I said, Tommy, I don't drink much for starters. And I certainly don't drink during the day. He said, you're coming for a drink with me now. Because we may never have one again, he said. We might never have one again, he said. And I want to have one with you. Just tell everybody, I had a drink with Ring before he left town. So it was a great car. And it was just what was needed. And he sat down and he said, we're going. And I said, Tommy, we're going? So I said, okay. I had to go. I had to go with him. So I said, where will we go? He said, we'll go over to like Porterhouse, or we'll go to Matt Malloy and we'll tell everybody that you're dying, he said. I said, sound, I'll go with you. I'll have one drink. So anyway, we left anyway, and we're going to cross the road, and there was this lovely tweed suit on Teddy's window. And he said, Jesus, there's a suit now for a nice, thin, narrow man like myself. And he said, Jesus, that's a grand suit. And so I says, Tommy, you hardly think you're going to fit that. Not at all, he said, that's for you, he said, when you're going into the coffin, he said, but I'm just wondering, he said, would you have one in my size, he said, so I could wear it on the day. But it was just fascinating. So anyway, we go in anyway. Tommy is an awful winding merchant, so he'd always set you up and wind you up. So anyway, all I remember was I went into the Porterhouse, and it was the day of the Shannon. The Sunday was the Shannon referendum. This was the Tuesday. And of course the referendum had gone against the government. Because people had voted against the government to save the Shannon. Of course, 99% of them wanted to save the Shannon, but it was a vote against Enda Kenny. So anyway, we're inside anyway, and no disrespect to anybody, but it was the 3 o'clock in the day brigade, and I always look at them and I see all I can remember was 3 inside in the Porterhouse, and when you see the elbows up on the counter like this, and the pint over here, and the elbows up on the counter, it's the See You Tuesday brigade. There was one here, one in the middle, and one at the end. Barman behind the bar. Of course, we had one drink and we're going grand there, and this fella was beside Tommy anyway. Tommy is just winding. He says, and who are you? He says, I'm Dublin John. And he says, do you work? Oh, jeez, no. He said, I hurt my back about 15 years ago and I haven't worked since. He said, typical. And anyway, he said, the other fella there, who are you? And he says, jeez, I'm down from Mullingar. And do you work? No, he said, I twisted my ankle about 4 years ago, he said, and I haven't worked since. And he said to the other, I said, Jesus Christ, I said, here we go. So we're going grand anyway for a while anyway, and he says, and do you know this fella? And he says, no, I don't know him. That's Ring. Do you know Michael Ring, the minister? That's that fella's brother now. Do you know the crowd that lost the vote the last year? Did you vote? No, I hadn't time. Typically said, Jesus, they lost the vote. Imagine they lost the vote. And then we're going on anyway. And the 3 of them, they're all starting to gang up on me anyway. And this fella that was with me, Tommy Carew, he's on a pension, ESB pension. I'm told the greatest pension in the world. So he's on the top ESB pension. So it's going on, and they're beginning to gang up on me anyway, and I look at the barman's from South Africa behind the bar anyway, so we're going on and I have enough. So I get up anyway and I hit the bar and I said, I have enough of the lot of you, I said. Do you know what, I said? I'm looking at the 4 of you here, says I. And it's like, the barman and myself are the only 2 feckers in this place who are working to keep the rest of you guys in beer and fun. Now I say, feck off.